Hello and welcome to the new Humanum channel. My name is Robin Aitken, I'm a journalist and I'm going to be interviewing some of the people who we'll introduce you to on this new venture. Our aim is to provide a different perspective, a Christian perspective, on issues which are consuming contemporary British culture. And the people you'll meet will largely be Christian, but some will be from other faiths and some will be agnostic. The first person I want you to meet is Dr. Michael Nazir-Ali. Dr. Michael is the man who founded the new Humanum Group and thus set the wheels in motion. Michael, welcome to our new channel.
Thank you very much for having me.
Let us start by the obvious question. What is the new Humanum Group for and why did you decide to create it?
It began really with two things, the two streams as it were. One was that the Vatican had a big conference some years ago where they invited people from many different backgrounds, not just Catholics, not just Christians, but people of other faiths. The chief rabbi at the time, Jonathan Sachs, was there. The aim was to get people to agree to the extent that they could about what it means to be human in our world today. That is why the title of the conference was Humanum. And they produced some excellent resources, anthropologically, sociologically, and so on, in the wake of the conference. The other stream was that John Stott, who was a very well-known evangelical Anglican leader, had died, and a number of his friends said to me he used to bring together groups, leaders from different parts of the community, people who were experts in their own fields, to come together and discuss trends in society. And they were regretting the fact that this would not now happen. And could I take some kind of initiative? So I thought those two things came together quite nicely, that the Vatican initiative, there needed to be some continuity. I mean, there's no point in just having a conference and then going on as if nothing had happened, and particularly in this country. And also this idea of bringing people together who are leaders in their own fields, whether it's education or the armed forces or health, and bring them together to consider trends in society. That's how it began.
And what sort of people are there on the group? I mean, tell me a little bit about the group itself. Who's on it and what do you do exactly?
Yes, I mean, there are people from the media on it. You're on it, Robin. There are people from the armed forces, senior people there. There are doctors and nurses. There are people involved in social work, in public affairs, in parliament. Yes, all kinds of people.
And what would you say are the issues which most interest the group? What have you been concentrating on in terms of, what do you talk about mainly?
Well, first of all, yes, what does it mean to be human from a variety of points of view? That is our main concern, that we should arrive at some view of humanity that is objective, ontological, having to do with the way in which people are, rather than just made up and constructivist.
And in what sense does the Christian view of what it means to be human, can you encapsulate what that means and why it is different from, say, a secular view of what it means to be Christian? I mean, what is the essence of the thing?
Well, the Christian view and a secular view needn't be opposed to one another. I mean, for most of history in this country, the public doctrine of what it means to be human has actually been quite closely aligned with the Christian view. It's only more recently that we've started to diverge, and that itself is a matter of concern. I mean, take the public doctrine of marriage in this country was very much, for 1500 years, the Christian view of marriage on questions of consent, of divorce, of the responsibility for children, and all of those things. So it's not that we are necessarily setting this up in opposition to anything, but certainly to articulate a view of the human condition and therefore of society which is consistent with the Judaeo-Christian worldview. I mean, the obvious place to start is the inalienable dignity of the human person. I mean, this needs a transcendental basis. You can't just argue for it on a utilitarian basis, and people who do very often find themselves then with the death of 1,000 cuts about to whom does human dignity pertain. So if you start with that, with human dignity, then the question is, when does human dignity attach itself to the human person? Are there any circumstances where it could be detached from the human person? What can we do and not do to the human person? I mean, can we starve a human person to death, for instance? And there are many other issues that arise from a Judeo-Christian point of view.
And the current trends in society, things, for instance, like the debate around transgenderism at the moment, and you've alluded to it already, the question of divorce in society, the ease with which people can divorce, and in fact, the fact that a lot of people don't get married at all, don't bother to get married. These things, in your view, and in the group's view, these things are harmful, are they? I mean, these are trends which you see as detrimental to our society and to us, the people who live in it.
I think what is detrimental is to deny that there is an ontological, an objective basis to being human as male or as female. Now, of course, there are always hard cases, extreme cases. There are people who are born with characteristics where it is uncertain whether they're male or female, and I think it's Christian kindness to render them one thing or the other if that is the case. But that is quite different from denying that there is such a thing as a male and female distinction in being human, where there is both similarity and difference, both objective similarity and objective difference, which has implications for the flourishing of each.
And this new channel which we are launching, it's your hope, is it, that these will be the sorts of topics that we'll be discussing in these interviews?
Well, indeed, and this is a very wide range. This relates to things that happen to people in hospital, maybe things that happen to them even before they're born. They may happen to them at the point of death, or what people might think is their point of death. It would happen to people who, for some reason, some trauma or other, are unconscious for very long periods of time. I mean, it happens, it's about family relationships, particularly that of husband and wife, but also of parents and children. So it's a vast range. It's about education, so many things.
As we both know, there has been a slump in religious observance in Britain, particularly among the Christian denominations. There's a danger, isn't there, that people like us, people who are professed Christians, as it were, end up talking only to other Christians. What is it, do you think, what is your hope that this channel can bring to a wider audience? Why should anybody who is not Christian and maybe is quite repelled by the idea of organized religion, so-called, and God, that what would anyone get, do you hope, from listening to these interviews?
Well, that's a very complicated question. I'll try and sort of unpick it a bit. So first of all, of course, there are many issues which are concerning not just Christians, but many other people of goodwill. So the question of freedom of thought, of expression, freedom of speech, of a society where differences can be aired and where issues come to be settled only after a free discussion. I mean, that's of interest to a very large number of people who may not be part of organized religion. And this is also true of how human beings think of themselves. There are prominent people like Jordan Peterson who are thinking along the lines that the Judeo-Christian tradition has stated without themselves being professing Jews or Christians at this time. Secondly, the question about values, I suppose you'd call them, is not just about organized religion. I mean, my time in Parliament showed me that on numerous occasions, either in terms of legislation or policy making or public debate, there needs to be a point of departure. So when there is the question of armed intervention somewhere or the other, that may be a conventional war or it may be some other kind of non-conventional intervention. The question always is this justified? So where are you going to start? And in fact, the discussion always starts with the Christian theory of the just war. Now, that theory is not set in stone. It needs development and evolution as circumstances change. But you do need a point of departure from a particular tradition. This is also true when we are thinking about the dignity of human beings, for instance, from the very beginning of life to the very end. How do we treat people with the dignity that we have not bestowed on them, that belongs to them intrinsically? Questions about relationships, about how we treat people who may be disabled in some way. All of those things. We need what I'm trying to say is we need a tradition, a way of thinking about moral issues in public life. I'm not talking about faith groups or anything like that. Thirdly, the question about organized religion. Now, everyone is in favor of the spiritual these days, and that's great. Human beings are also spiritual beings. They're not simply commercial beings or material beings, but they are spiritual. And religion is actually the social expression of the spiritual. I think that expression is necessary if society is to carry certain kinds of values that are necessary for its existence. It is necessary for intergenerational transmission of these values. Now, religion can go wrong. I don't deny that. So can other ideologies, secular ones. But to say that because it can go wrong, it is therefore not necessary is, I think, a category mistake.
So your point here is that it is Christianity which has informed our tradition of our culture. So the Christian way of thinking is deeply set in our culture. But do you think now that this society is in retreat from that Christian tradition? And is this the thing which is worrying?
Well, it's certainly true that a Judeo-Christian, a biblical view of viewing the human condition has been characteristic of the society, and it's also true that society is moving away from it. But there is another point to it, which is that the Judeo-Christian tradition has held certain things about the nature of human beings that are objectively true. It is not just that it is believed, these kinds of things are believed in by Jews or Christians, but there are things about the human condition that happen to be the case. There was a great tradition in philosophy called realism, and I think that is what we need to struggle for, is a realist view of humanity rather than a constructivist, where you just make up something as it suits your circumstances.
And Christianity is that realist view of society?
Yes, I think it has a realist view of the human person and of society, and I don't think there's any real alternative to such a view. That the ones that are proposed are simply made up, as it were, as people go along.
And is the point of this channel then to bring these considerations which you've outlined more into the public domain? Do you feel at the moment that this perspective is not properly represented in the public square?
Well, I think it certainly should be a channel where these views can be aired, but in the context of discussion and open debate, it may be right from time to time to bring in people who challenge some of our assumptions. I'm not saying that they are beyond challenge. In fact, I think what we believe in gets stronger if it is challenged, and we are made to think about what we believe. No kind of prohibition on that kind of debate and discussion. But also there are many other people who may not be Christians who actually see the point of what is being said.